Um, Welcome everyone to the first of our new series of podcasts here on the Funderbeam podcast, focusing on founder stories, journeys, lessons learned, not necessarily all restricted to the fundraising element of their journey, but just about motivation, what has driven them, challenges, and stuff that I think anyone that's worked in the startup space will have encountered. But it's great to hear different points of view, and also it's great to hear ways around some of the obstacles that you face. So really pleased to be joined by Jakob Hansen from DoLand today, one of the businesses that is currently raising on Funderbeam. It's the 9th of December now, if you're listening, after the event, but we're not really going to talk about the fundraise specifically right now. Anyway, first off, Jakob, hi, how are you doing?
Hi, Ollie, thanks. I'm doing very well and honored to be here on your first of the series.
Yeah, no, I think well, we're very pleased to have you, of course. The interesting angle for me, I think, well, actually first, before I go into the angle, why don't you just give us the DoLand pitch, just so that everyone who's listening is aware of what it is, and then we'll go into a bit more detail about why and where.
Right. No, so please, basically DoLand is making it possible for everyone to invest according to their preferences within sustainability. So we have a digital platform where you can tell us what you feel about 9 different areas within sustainability, which is quite different from person to person. We also do a financial investment advice and make a recommendation that suits both your preferences for sustainability and as well as your financial situation. And we execute it efficiently. And then you can subsequently track both the impact and the financial developments on our My DoLand space. So that's in a nutshell what we are, and we of course keep pushing the boundaries for what is possible and etc.
Okay, so sustainability, obviously a massive watchword in all walks of life at the moment. People may know about things like sustainable development goals. They may be aware of living more sustainably every day themselves, and of course we're kind of bombarded with sustainability messages from big brands and corporates now, who realize that they have to be in that space and kind of execute their own CSR accordingly. What was it about the sustainability arena that drew you in the first place? Because I believe your background's in investment banking or just in investing in general.
Yeah, my background is in investing in general, having worked many years, almost decades, in traditional banks, asset managers, with investments from multiple angles, both from sort of hardcore investing, communicating about it, having clients, also driving strategic change and developing new business areas. But what drew me to DoLand and sort of what sparked the idea was that after these, many years of doing investing, when I told people what I did for a living, most people were just as white in the face as they were 13, 14 years earlier when I started. So basically, there's a deep disinterest in investments quite broadly. So that was one crack we hadn't obviously cracked that was to be cracked. Then secondly, I found it hugely problematic that people like myself and people around me were a minority, basically, were deciding where the money of people were flowing, their investments, and hence what type of society we're building, without asking, particularly the sort of the normal person on the street, what do you actually want to promote? What kind of society do you want to build with your savings, which wasn't part of the equation in general or the dialogue with people specifically. And basically, cracking that nut also made it interesting for people because that the possibility to put your thumbprint on your investments and what type of sustainability to drive is actually what then makes it personal and relevant. And then tapping into your question on sustainability, well, basically that's a huge agenda that needs massive amounts of investments, and it's also square and center of what most people care about in their daily lives, like 70% want to live more sustainably. but they just don't know, they're not aware of investments being a vehicle towards that, you could say, that purpose. So it's very natural to use sustainability as the anchor and keep pushing that as the basically as the core of what we do.
It's interesting. So let's take, so just for those listening, DoLand is a Danish business, and at present, the platform services the Danish population. Let's just talk about Denmark for a moment, and why it's a sort of suitable kind of test bed for this. How are people's general sort of views and awareness on sustainability issues in Denmark? Is it high on people's personal agenda? Because we obviously know that geographically sustainability is, higher or lower in people's minds of, levels of importance. So what about Denmark in terms of sustainability as a kind of, as a driver of change?
No, it's quite high on the agenda, and hence it's also, as you say, an interesting area to our country to start off with. It's about, we did a large survey of the Danish population this summer on a range of questions within sustainability and sustainable investing, and 70% stated that they would like to live more sustainably. And around half say they do it either through, half say they do it through their, purchases, through the way they work, how they vote at elections, etc. But you can see a sharply lower number when you ask them about how many then use investments towards sustainability. So it's generally high on the agenda, and also growing as an area of attention, but lagging within investments. And in general, you could say the knowledge and interest in investments is low in Denmark compared to, say, Sweden, one of our neighbors, where investing is a little more something you speak about at dinner tables. It's also growing in Denmark, but it's a little lower.
I think that from my previous career working in heavily in sustainable projects, that impact investing was also seen as quite an institutional thing. Like if impact investing was this big kind of blob that only very big funds could get into, and there's impact funds and all the rest of it. And this is 10 years ago, but it seemed very specialist. And I think it's interesting I've seen that you use the language of democratizing investment, and it's interesting to kind of take a look at that. Do you feel that people are still a bit not uninformed, but maybe there's a barrier to entry for investing in sustainable projects?
Definitely, and I agree completely. And it's still that way, that it's largely institutionalized, and you could say the playground, if you will, of the ones with more means to be able to do this. And when I said this was the ambition to do this to my former colleagues at the time, they were all like, dream on, it's not going to happen. This is not the way the world works. And that's because their mindset was sort of the old business model, the current infrastructure, the way asset management is kind of a scale business, etc. It's like you're not going to get people started from 75 euros and get them invested in, you could say, areas of their choice. But happily, it was possible. And here we are. And I always forget your question. You had a question that got me off here, but
no, it's all right. Let's look at the barrier to entry thing.
Sure.
Is the bit that.
Yeah, sorry, Ollie, now I remember. Yeah, the same survey I referred to earlier has about a third of people replying that sort of they don't feel they have the knowledge, you could say the skills to try and look at it as sustainable investing. And then a third who actually tried say it's just hard to understand what is this really sustainable? What does all this terminology mean, and what is really below the hood, etc. So sort of both interest and time is an issue, and that goes to investing in general, I think. And then when you add the layer of sustainability, of course, it only adds complexity and more stuff to try and get your head around. So those are huge barriers, and that's also what we can see when people tell us about DoLand and what they appreciate. One of them is definitely that we help them express what they want to emphasize, and then basically we take care of what they should then invest in to do that.
Yeah. So before we get on to more about your journey, that's an interesting point. How do you look to source the investments that you're either recommending or people have preferenced? Because it's a big world. There's an awful lot of projects, and some with differing levels of importance. I think I remember when you first came onto the platform, we were looking at the literature, and there was a line about how some people may have a real personal cause or calling towards education or quite the other direction to greener issues. How do you find the kind of balance across your portfolio of projects to be able to get the right info to the right people?
Right. Very good question, and also a big question. But the way we work is that we are theme based, so we have 9 themes, soon 10, ranging from the green transition and renewable energy, which are some of the more popular ones, but it also stuff like sustainable cities or health, innovative healthcare, all the way to social impact and diversity. So we have a quite broad spectrum of it, and it's very much driven by the demand that we have seen for expressing, you could say, preferences to different themes. What we're working increasingly with, we have recently launched an impact investment panel that has some very, you could say, insightful and experienced people with an impact in it, is to increasingly add, you could say, the dimension of, okay, what does the world need, and what kind of impact, where's the impact the biggest? But the way we then do it is within each theme, say renewable energy, we then go out and look what is available in the market, or social impact, and what is available in the market. And then we have a big database, financial database of all the funds out there with a lot of data. And then basically that's, we look across that, and it's a bit of it's hard because this is not the way the financial sector thinks. So it's not like you have categories.
Yeah.
So you have to do word searches and have to know the managers and all these things to actually, okay, so what is out there, but also using this database. And then we have a process around impact, financials, and the manager, a lot of different parameters to assess the different funds and come up with the 1 or 2 or 3 best ones. And part of that is also using an impact screening tool that is also used by institutional investors to help us really dig deep into different, you could say, sustainability and impact measures to know what's in the different funds. And then that's kind of our process. Then the fund manager that we recommend the clients to use, they do the actual, so picking the bond or picking the equity or picking the project that actually goes towards, say, social impact, because we don't claim to be we can't be the expert on everything. We can be an expert on finding the right manager and an expert on impact in general. But it's Simon Bond from Threadneedle who's actually picking the specific social impact bond to be in the portfolio. So that's how we've split it up.
So it sounds to me, and this is the untrained eye or untrained ear, that there's a lot of moving parts to the DoLand business. So let's this sort of moves me on to the founder journey. When you decided that one day this was the idea you wanted to pursue, how did you, this is one thing that I'm going to ask everyone that comes on this, is, your day one of let's do DoLand, what was, because when how things develop and so many layers get added and added and added, what was your kind of day one task for this? Like, did you sit down and have a very clear idea of the direction of travel, or did you know, like, the idea you had in your mind, but now I need to find out how to get there? What was your kind of day one, week one sort of thought process when you started DoLand?
Oh, it's a very interesting question. So basically I had a quite clear idea in my head, hypothesis, if you will, but I didn't feel I could really pursue it given where I was working. So I wanted to keep it very straight. So it was basically an idea and going over the budget with my wife to, to test whether I could, jump into something like this. And then basically that's where I started. Setting up a desk in a room in the house, and then starting sketching from that, and basically working with the ideas, and some of the very early steps was of course validating, whether there was any kind of truth to the demand and interest in this type of project, and then it evolved a lot from there. I didn't do a lot of planning, explorations, research. If I had done that, I would probably have reached the conclusion of my former colleagues that it was not going to be possible.
Yeah.
This wouldn't have happened. So you could say, in a way, luckily, I didn't, because there were a few obstacles to climb and get around and dig under, etc.
How did you find
it was very much from scratch initially?
The mental side of making the leap is often, I found in my experience, is often harder than starting the journey, the actual work. It's getting over the idea that, hold on, I'm going into the unknown. And, in most people, well, not everyone, but most people often have to make this choice of leaving a steady job and regular income and all the rest of it to then make the decision. And of course, most people at this point don't have a lot of funding, or if they do, it's limited to certain activities. So you said you spoke to your wife about that, but was it in your mind, a big giant risk, or was it something that you could try and do, and if it didn't work, you can always go back? Did you feel like you were, as they say in poker, going pot committed, or there was room for flexibility if things didn't quite work out?
No, of course it was a risk, but I very much saw it as, I think times are changing in that regard as well, and in the sense that I would see it as an asset, having this experience, and if I had to go back, you could say, to something more traditional afterwards. But it was a very obviously a lot of the driving force for me, well, one was this, the big focus on the users need this. Of course, it was also a personal thing for me, and you could say stuff I wanted to get away from. So bureaucracies, meetings, slow processes, heritage systems, committees up here, there, down, and then you and from that, it was very refreshing to come out in an you could say entrepreneurial world where the doors are open. It's very collaborative. It's just fantastic to experience that kind of playground, if you will. Like, then it introduces other challenges, because, and maybe that's more coming from a corporate world going to the entrepreneurial world, where in a corporate world, if you want to achieve something, it's very much about finding your way around things, and stakeholders, and it's a lot of entrenched stuff getting in your way. When you're out here in the entrepreneurial world, it's like 360. It's like the whole world is open. And what I had to learn in a way was and then you meet all these people with great ideas, and if you don't watch out, you can be you'll just drift all over the place. So you need you need to listen to all the good inputs, but then still be fairly firm on your direction and idea, and believe in what you are moving towards, to not veer too much off track, right?
Yeah, no, I understand where you're coming from, for sure. And there are obviously the safety nets that are around in the corporate world, and in many places, although there's a lot of over complication of processes and things, sometimes they're quite useful, and you know what you have to do. And when you're starting your first one and you get your first employees, you're making these up as you go. And for many people, this isn't their first skill set, so it's not a mistake that anyone makes, but when you're starting something new and you're inventing processes, they're there to be broken pretty quickly. And if you're like me, a more creative focused, the operational side of things and all of that is often not the thing you want to do either.
True. No, I can recognize a lot of that. And I do early phases, it would have been nice to, have a lawyer to call, or the HR department, or IT technician, or what have you. And that's, of course, the flip side of things. You put on a lot of hats when you start the entrepreneurial journey. But but that's part of the experience.
So talking about this, so let's move towards the actual business then as an operating unit. And we mentioned some early stage challenges there, which I think is the same for everyone. As things have evolved, what do you find, or what have you found has been your biggest like business challenge? You know, many people would say fundraising and runway and all of those things. Has it been that side of things, or has it been more on the sales or the marketing or proving the idea or even the app development? Because I mean, that must be super complicated as well.
Yeah. I think and it's basically a combination, right? And one of the challenges I found was that given that we are a fintech, there's some technology to build. There are some you need a license. You need to find partners to make this happen. Obviously you need a team, and to make all this happen, you also need funding. And it can become a bit of a hen and egg problem, how to solve these, and it's definitely something that takes time, etc. But yeah, funding is always something that we're working on. It's and probably discuss more of that. But I think we find the exact right model for us with Funderbeam and crowdfunding, which is basically taking our own medicine and democratizing ourselves. But there was a technology to build. There were convincing partners to partner up with us. But having said that, it's been amazing how open the doors and how interested asset managers, etc., are to speak with us, despite the stage we're at, etc. And of course, finding a team is important, etc. So it's hard to say like this was the big challenge, and of course it changes over time as well. But yeah.
You mentioned the crowdfunding aspect of it. Sorry, the baby's just in the background. He's not happy. The crowdfunding aspect of things, obviously, where Funderbeam have a role to play. But can you explain to me or to our audience about the appetite for crowdfunding in Denmark? Because I've read in several places that as a society, it's something that people have bought into for quite a while, and it's something that people are quite comfortable with. Which is definitely different in different parts of Europe. Does that still remain true today?
I think there's probably an appetite for it. There's been some lending platforms are more you could say developed in the Danish market than the equity side of things. And there is in general an equity culture that is not as developed, equity investor culture that is not as developed in Denmark as elsewhere. But I think at least and to be honest, I can't claim to be an expert on crowdfunding and how it's viewed in Denmark in general, but I can see that the feedback we're getting coming out as a company and funding ourselves in this way is getting a lot of good feedback and interest.
So, I mean, on that note, let's quickly talk about the Funderbeam element of it. You have raised money before from different sources, angel groups and from prominent investors and so on and so forth. What was the attraction to not necessarily just Funderbeam, but using the crowd to help go that little extra mile?
I think it's basically down to what we stand for and what we want to achieve, and our mission of democratizing access to sustainable investing is kind of what we work on every day, and having that as what we do, it just seemed so natural to embrace it ourselves and also make our own company something that was democratized and being available for basically most people, at least through an equity crowdfunding. And we also see you could say the IPO as the natural exit for us for very similar reasons. So I think, I mean, and just the whole, the attention that comes to the ambassadors that come from that, also doing that, and the footprint that we get across Europe from funding ourselves in this way, etc. So there's a lot of interesting dimensions to doing equity crowdfunding, I think.
So talking of Europe and other areas outside of Denmark, where we presume the aim is to expand, outside of that eventually. Where is the fertile territory, if you like, for sustainable investing outside of Denmark?
I think it's so you're right. We're currently focused on Denmark, and our license currently covers the Danish market. What we'll be doing in the next period is working on a license that has a passport, can be passported to across the EU. So basically opens up for being in other countries, and that is definitely the ambition. What we have looked at mostly so far, and also kind of our hypothesis markets are the Nordic markets, due to also a big focus on sustainability, very digital, and also some similar cultures, etc. But when we look, I mean, Germany has a very strong focus on sustainability as well. For instance, less digitized, but then that's an opportunity to kind of deliver that type of solution, etc. So I think it's the Netherlands is also quite promote, you could say, moving forward on sustainability, etc. So, and I think it might be different in different places, but there's no question about the strong trend that's going on within sustainability, both within investing and also more generally in terms of interest and thrust, I think.
So I just got stuck on mute there. What do you think the risks are with the expansion? I mean, presumably there's quite a lot of analysis done on market size in Denmark and market receptiveness and all of those things. Is there a perceived risk from your point of view about kind of taking it out of the home territory? I mean, presumably this is what happens to a lot of people when they're thinking of expansion, is you have to kind of do all the same work you've already done again. What sort of element of risk do you think there is in the expansion?
Right. I mean, I think that the basics of what we do is quite scalable and travels quite well across borders. Of course, there's some differences in language in the way we address people, and some choices to make there. And there's also, from an investment perspective, some small elements to look into. But the biggest risk or the biggest challenge, as I see it, is kind of getting traction in a new market, finding the right partners, getting customers on board, learning the nuances of a new market, etc. Which obviously there will be. So it's mostly that side of things, as I see it.
And so let's just move on to the product itself, because we haven't, I mean, as Funderbeam, we obviously know a lot about it, but maybe our audience haven't all seen the financial offering. If someone wants to take a look, where do they go? What do they do? And specifically, what should they look out for?
So our, you could say, offering itself is on thisisdoland.com. Which is the, you could say, entry point to getting an investment on our DoLand solution. Choosing the themes, getting the advice based on your financial situation, onboarding, and also where you sign into the My DoLand space where you can track your investment subsequently. But that's both in Danish and English, and you can check out the different elements of our offering there. The onboarding itself is currently only in Danish and only for people that live in Denmark, but the offering is described there. Then on funderbeam.com, we have our, you could say, our campaign running, where you can see how more sort of from an investor perspective as well, how things look. Some of the and after the campaign, you can find us on the marketplace, which is of course also relevant, and I think a big attraction of the Funderbeam platform. Some of the you could say the metrics that we are quite proud of is that 40% of our investors have never invested before, and 47% are women. And we had this hypothesis that we would, as I said initially, engage more people in investing and expand the market, and that's very much what's happening. So we're tapping into the piles and piles of cash on people's bank accounts and mobilizing it to investing with a positive impact. People are investing recurringly. People do choose very different sustainability profiles. So it makes sense to have the ability to make a personalized investment to the individual. That's definitely not the standard in neither banks or digital advisors. And we can also see that our users are quite strong ambassadors. So I think those are some of the key points that we, and basically the solution is working, it's scalable. So basically we have a good foundation to start ramping up.
Yeah, that's interesting. The brand ambassador aspect is something, I guess, that is very different from traditional investments, because although you might say to someone, oh, I've done well in this, or I've not done well in that, with this case, you can actually really see how people might explain to each other why they've invested in a certain thing, and actually take away that kind of, as you said, the kind of blank face of, oh, I'm investing. And I find that very very interesting, and something to keep an eye on. How would you envisage people sharing those sort of stories? I mean, presumably the normal social channels, but is there a way to scale up the kind of the awareness of the projects that you've got your clients investing in?
Sure. I mean, I think people do share sort of the experience on the platform and talk about that. We are looking into different ways of that being a vehicle to mobilize other people. But I think what's also interesting is that, given that our focus is on sustainability in general and different themes within sustainability, suddenly we can go out and talk to, societies or, movements, companies, membership organizations, where they wouldn't typically have any kind of association with an investing. It wouldn't be a natural, common ground. But given that we have a focus on sustainability, there's a lot of common ground to be made with a lot of different partners, and we're using that quite, you could say, actively as a way to, expand the knowledge of DoLand, get more people involved, and getting more assets mobilized towards these purposes.
Yeah, that's cool. I like the sound of how we can both make people more aware of sustainable investments, but sustainability issues, but also kind of maybe take down this sort of very serious wall about investing and so on. And so, since this, we're going to come to a close, but since this is, a founder focused podcast today, it would be great to maybe take, people probably ask you this all the time, and I know it comes around, but one piece of advice or inspiration for anyone listening who is thinking of starting their own journey, whether it be as founding a startup or co-founding something. What would you take away from the last few years' experience that you think would be a handy piece of advice for someone to bear in mind?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's also a big question, but I think one element is just do it. I mean, I wouldn't have done it if I had analyzed too much. It would never have happened. So of course that comes with some risk as well, I realize, but if you really want to do something, do it. Then, as I said earlier, actually keep the needle in the compass, because the focus is needed. Listen, you will meet a lot of great people, a lot of good opportunities, but it's important to stay focused and kind of have a sticky compass, if you will. Of course, you have to listen to advice as well, and then just embrace all the great opportunities out there for partnerships, and scale as quickly as you can and get people on board to move things. That would be my 3 areas of advice.
Very, very good advice indeed. Well, look, thanks, Jakob, for joining. Before we leave, I must state that this isn't an endorsement for investing DoLand at all. DoLand is raising on Funderbeam. Your capital is at risk, but please read through all the information that's there before you do or don't decide to invest in the project. Thanks, Jakob. I'm sure we'll be speaking again in the coming days. And if I don't see you or speak to you before, I hope you have a really good festive period.
Thanks, Ollie. Thanks all.